In the summer of 1999, a group of graduating seniors from Westgrove High School in Western Oregon planned a farewell camping trip to mark the end of their school days. They packed their bags onto a familiar yellow school bus, started the engine, laughed, and vanished into the forest, without leaving a single trace. No phone calls, no distress signals. No one ever came back. Even the bus, the only physical evidence, disappeared as if it had been swallowed by the earth itself. 22 years passed, and the story of the class of '99 slowly became a whispered legend told around campfires. A chilling warning, uncertain whether it was truth or just a haunting prank from the schoolyard days. That was until June 3, 2021, when a veteran hiker exploring Oregon's Siskiyou National Forest stumbled upon a pale yellow object hidden beneath a tangle of moss and overgrowth. At first, he thought it was an abandoned shack, but the closer he got, the more his spine tingled. It was the rusted skeleton of a school bus, half consumed by roots and the deep forest. Inside, everything seemed frozen in time. Faded backpacks still hung from hooks, blurred Polaroid photos scattered across the floor. A warped cassette player, swollen from years of moisture. But what truly stole the breath from his lungs was at the very back seat, a pile of old-school uniforms and a human jawbone poking through the forest dust. Police arrived and quickly linked the scene to one of Oregon's most mysterious mass disappearance cases. But the deeper they dug, the more they felt lost in a maze with no exit. There was no record of the bus ever being rented, no logs of its route. Not even a trail wide enough for a bus to have entered that part of the forest. Everything inside the bus remained intact, as if someone had deliberately arranged it. Personal belongings laid out as if for some kind of ritual. No signs of an accident, no evidence of violence. Just silence, and an eerie sense that something had happened here the world was never meant to uncover. Back in 1999, Westgrove High was buzzing with excitement in the weeks leading up to graduation. 26 students, bonded like family, were preparing for one last trip together. They weren't the popular kids, but they were inseparable. Lacey Monroe, the student body president, daughter of the town's mayor, was the golden girl in the eyes of adults, yet carried more pressure than anyone knew. Jared Fields, the class clown, clung to his camcorder, determined to capture their final days together in a documentary. Tyrese Hall, the big, burly athlete with a soft, loyal heart. None of them knew that trip would be the last time they'd see each other, or the light of day. What truly happened in those woods that year, no one fully understands. But one thing is certain, that bus was never meant to be found, because some secrets are meant to stay buried deep in the forest. And some stories, once told, have the power to awaken things that should have stayed asleep. Among them was Tyrese Hall, the great hope of the football team. The one everyone believed would walk through the gates of the University of Oregon on a prestigious athletic scholarship. But Tyrese hid a deep fear that the peak of his life might have already been left behind on that high school field. There was also Emily Tran, the quiet girl who always carried a sketchbook. She didn't socialize much, but everyone trusted Emily because she drew their faces from her dreams, surrounded by strange forest scenes she couldn't explain. The bus that day was driven by a substitute named Harold Griggs, called in at the last minute the night before. After the regular driver phoned out due to health reasons, the bus pulled away with laughter, waving hands, and a hastily snapped group photo. The last trace of them anyone would ever see. That evening, at 6:41 p.m., Elsie McClure, the mother of a girl named Rachel, received a strange voicemail. Her daughter's voice was faintly laughing, then suddenly cut off by a panicked shout, "Turn it off," followed by complete silence. No click, no goodbye, just a long stretch of static, like something broadcast from another world. The bus never arrived at its destination. At first, people thought they'd gotten lost in the fog or slipped on a dangerous road. But by morning, concern turned to panic. Helicopters scoured the skies, search dogs combed the trails, but there were no tire tracks, no broken branches, no radio signals, as if the bus and all 27 people had crossed into another dimension. A week later, a fisherman discovered a half-buried disposable camera in the mud, 15 miles from the nearest road. It had been ruined by water. When it was opened, the film had been completely stripped. Not a single photo, Not a single clue. And that wasn't the end. 10 days later, the Callahan family, whose son Trevor was among the missing, received a mysterious envelope. No postmark, no return address, just a small slip of paper with a scribbled message. "We did it. Stop looking." At first, they hoped it meant Trevor was alive, but handwriting analysts said otherwise. The writing resembled Trevor's, but something was off, like someone was deliberately trying to imitate him. The pressure was uneven. The curves felt unnatural. It was a distorted copy, with intent. Each detail was like a puzzle piece, but none of them fit. The disappearance of that class wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning. Sometimes there are trips not meant for the living, and there are forests that, once entered, offer no way out. For years, the town of Forest Grove lived with a silent, unanswered question. What really happened to those 27 students? Rumors spread like mushrooms after the rain. Some claimed the entire group had staged their disappearance, escaping the pressures of school life to live mysteriously in the deep woods. Others whispered about occult rituals, fringe cults, even forces not of this world. No matter which theory people believed, the reality remained. No clues, no bodies, and not a single person ever came back. No one had seen the bus. No witnesses ever stepped forward. And after 2 months of desperate searching, the case was closed under a heavy, suffocating silence, a disappearance with no answers and no ending. But parents don't let go that easily. Every year, someone still ventures into the forest, retracing old paths with fragile hope. Old photos still appear on the missing persons board. Some became obsessed with the mystery, like Robert Vasquez, father of a boy named Noah. His journals were filled with bizarre theories, strange details, and sleepless nights spent turning over the same question: where did they go? In one handwritten entry, Robert once wrote, "I don't believe it was an accident, and they weren't lost. I believe something took them, something that doesn't want to be found." He never explained further, but strangely, no one could ever prove him wrong. 21 years later, the hallways of Forest Grove High echo with new laughter, new faces, new graduations. But the shadow of the class of '99 has never left. Near the entrance, a small bronze plaque bears the names of the 27 missing students and a line that reads, "Gone, but never lost." Every June, a memorial is held. 27 candles are lit. Some teachers retired early, unable to bear the haunting memory. Others still remember every face, every voice, as if they were still there, in a classroom that would never be whole again. In town, some bedrooms have been preserved exactly as they were that final morning. Posters on the wall, textbooks on desks, perfume bottles, graduation cards never sent. As if the kids had only stepped out for a moment and might walk back in at any time. Some parents hold on to hope like the last breath in their lungs. Others have fallen into a quiet grief, not crying, just hollow. Mr. Delaney, whose son Matthew vanished, still sits in the town library every day, reading his son's final essay over and over. Mrs. Santos, mother of Nina, the promising soccer star, still tends the garden her daughter once planted. But no one grieves more deeply than Irene Monroe, mother of Lacey. She refuses to declare her daughter dead. No gravestone, no death certificate. Lacey's toothbrush still sits in its cup. Old voicemails are carefully preserved, and every morning Irene makes the bed as if her daughter were just sleeping in. "I don't know where she is, but I can feel that she's still alive," she says. Neighbors call it denial. Family calls it a mother's instinct. And then once again, the bus appeared. June 3rd, 2021, late morning. A firefighter on leave, Travis Milner, left the town of Medford, seeking peace and quiet along the remote stretches of the Rogue River, an area few people visit. He wasn't looking for anything. But after a few hours wandering through overgrown trails and brush, he saw something glinting beneath a layer of rotting leaves. A rusted curve, corroded metal, a faint yellow hue, buried under moss and tangled vines. He pushed aside a curtain of ferns and saw the twisted frame of a school bus. The wheels were shattered, the tires rotted. The number faintly visible on the side, 57. The bus door was jammed, twisted as if trying to keep something hidden inside. Travis pulled with all his strength, and a wave of damp, moldy air poured out like a grave newly disturbed. Inside was suffocating silence. Seats were decayed. Black mold covered the windows. Vines had pierced through the floor, growing through seat backs. And on one of the back seats, something remained, an old backpack, and beneath it a fragment of human bone. The floor of the bus was rotted and moldy, yet traces of a long-dead student life still lingered. Mud-caked book bags, a sports jacket with the Forest Grove school emblem hanging limply, and 2 mold-darkened graduation caps stacked on top of each other near the back. But it was what lay scattered between the rows of seats that froze Milner in place. Fragments of human bones, some nearly fused with the earth, others still intact, as if death had only recently occurred. He counted, not 1, not 3, but 17 sets of remains. He immediately called 911. Within hours, the area was sealed off. Police, forensic teams, and anthropologists arrived, carefully inspecting the bus as if they were excavating a time-sealed relic. A mystery thought to be dead since 1999, now stirred back to life, raw like a wound that never healed. News exploded, media swarmed like a flood, and the parents, who had buried their pain for 22 years, were forced to face the nightmare all over again. While sweeping the scene, an investigator found something strange hidden beneath the driver's seat. A weathered manila folder, damp but not completely ruined. Inside were charcoal and pencil sketches, each signed in small letters at the bottom corner. T. Emily, Emily Thompson. Emily, the quiet student who never let go of her sketchbook. She had been among the missing, but her body was not found on the bus. The drawings were bone-chilling. Page 1. A circle of people standing in a forest clearing, surrounded by flickering flames. Page 2. Crude, hollow-faced masks. Page 3. Blood dripping from tree branches, forming a strange spiral pattern. Unfamiliar symbols were scribbled around the edges, matching no known language. And the final page, the one that left everyone speechless. A bus identical to number 57, abandoned, surrounded by tall, faceless figures. On the driver's seat sat a mask staring forward. DNA and dental analysis confirmed. Of the 28 people who vanished, 26 students and 2 teachers, only 17 bodies had been found. The other 9 students were missing. Even more suspicious, both accompanying teachers, Mr. Carl Muse and Ms. Janine Crawford, were not among the remains. What was found only raised more questions. The bus couldn't have made it that deep into the forest on its own. There were no tire marks, no trails wide enough, no trees cut down, no skid marks. It hadn't fallen into the woods. It had been placed there, intentionally. And if only 17 remains were found, what happened to the other 9? Where did they go? Why was Emily, the nearly invisible girl all year, the only one who left behind visual evidence of scenes that hinted at rituals, cults, or something beyond comprehension? Search teams swept a half-mile radius around the site. But the vegetation was too dense, the ground too soft, no footprints, no campsites, no blood, no sound. Only silence, and the feeling of being watched. The case was officially reopened, no longer labeled a missing persons investigation. It was now a crime scene. The drawings were leaked to the media, and with them a new theory surfaced. The class of '99 didn't just go missing. Someone or something planned for them to never return. A dark theory, a cruel one, but hard to dismiss. And now Oregon is no longer at peace. Just days after the bus was discovered, the small town and the entire state seemed to ignite with unanswered questions. What really happened in the summer of 1999? Who or what was behind Emily's disturbing illustrations? And why was the bus hidden until now, as if someone had worked to keep it buried forever? A new hunt has begun, but this time, no one is certain answers will ever be found. Because some secrets, once unearthed, drag something else out of the woods with them. Morning of June 10th. In the hazy fog of early morning, while the Bend Police Department was still wrapped in the monotony of another ordinary day, a lone figure quietly pushed open the door. Fluorescent lights flickered against the gaunt, hollow face of the man. A frail body draped in a torn coat, long matted hair as if untouched for years, eyes sunken and exhausted like he'd returned from another realm. His arrival froze the room. Conversations about the recently discovered rusted school bus died instantly. Every gaze turned toward the stranger, thin, frail, and carrying something ominous. The man said nothing at first. He walked slowly, every step deliberate, like he was moving through memories no one else could see. He stopped at the front desk, leaned forward slightly, and spoke in a raspy whisper, like wind blowing through an ancient tomb. I'm Jared Fields, class of '99. The room fell silent. No one moved. The name, after 22 years, hit like a bomb dropped into dead quiet. Jared Fields, the student who vanished on that ill-fated field trip. A boy long believed to be dead. One officer stammered, thinking it had to be a prank. But no one laughed. No one spoke. No one could take their eyes off the man who had just dragged the ghost of the past back into the present. Sergeant Emily Wells, who had followed the case since her first year on the force, stepped forward cautiously, as if standing before a gate just opened from hell. "Mr. Fields, do you have any ID?" Jared didn't respond. Instead, he looked around nervously, eyes scanning the corners like something might be hiding there. Sweat rolled down his temple. His lips trembled, barely mouthing the words. I shouldn't have come back. They're still watching me." Emily froze. That sentence didn't sound like something a survivor would say. It sounded like a curse from someone who'd escaped something dark. "Who are they, Jared?" she asked, her voice stretched tight. Jared shook his head, trembling. I don't know, but we were marked. None of us were supposed to leave. None of us." Jared no longer looked like a man. He was a shadow, a ghost of the boy once seen laughing behind a camera on that final trip. Now his eyes were empty, distant, like every minute he existed was a betrayal of some sacred warning. Sergeant Wells tightened her grip, trying to stay composed. "Mr. Fields, please tell us where you've been. What happened to the others? Your friends?" Jared stepped back, panic flaring in his eyes as he glanced toward the door like someone was standing just behind it. His lips moved, but the words barely came out. I can't. I'm not allowed. They'll find me." And then, almost as if it had been timed, a forensic technician walked in, holding a file. He handed it to Sergeant Wells. She opened it, scanned quickly, and her brow furrowed. Then her face changed to stunned disbelief. The fingerprints matched. The DNA matched. There was no doubt. The man standing before her was Jared Fields. She looked up. Jared met her eyes, and for the first time his fear wasn't fear anymore. It was pure despair. "I warned you," he whispered. "I was never supposed to come back. I broke the rule. And now, they won't let anyone go." Silence fell again, but not ordinary silence. It was the silence before a storm, a creeping, nameless dread. Something unseen, but coming closer. The officers looked at each other. They had hoped for answers. But now, no one was sure if what had just walked into their precinct was the answer, or the beginning of a new nightmare. The answer to the mystery of the bus and the 27 missing lives had seemed so close. But then, it all slipped away again. Jared Fields, the sole survivor, wasn't the answer. He was like a warped puzzle piece. The more you looked, the more everything felt wrong. The shadow he carried wasn't just his own, but something older and far darker. "Mr. Fields," Sergeant Wells said, her voice steady but not harsh. "What did you mean when you said you shouldn't come back? Where have you been all these years? And your classmates, what happened to them?" Jared flinched at the questions, like they dragged him backward through time. His face twisted in fear. He stepped back as if the very air in the room were threatening him. His eyes widened, like he was seeing something no one else could. "No, I can't say. Not now. They're still out there, and they don't want anyone to know." A thick, quiet silence settled over the room, heavy like fog before dawn. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether they should hold on to this man or let him go. And then Jared turned, driven by something primal. "I have to leave," he said quickly. "If I stay here, they'll find me." "Mr. Fields, wait." Sergeant Wells called after him, but the door had already closed behind him, cold and final. He vanished, the same way he had disappeared from that forest more than 2 decades ago. A few days later, Jared sat in the interrogation room. His eyes were hollow, his face etched with exhaustion. For 2 hours, he had painstakingly drawn out a timeline, fragmented memories from that final trip. And now, as every gaze turned to him, Jared exhaled. "They're gone," he began in a low, steady voice. "The ones who didn't obey disappeared. The ones who resisted were never seen again." He paused. His hands curled into themselves, like they'd once touched something that should never exist. And then, with a heavy breath, Jared began to speak. For the first time, the bleeding truth began to emerge from the shadows. It all started when the bus broke down. According to him, the engine failed in the middle of the wilderness, far from any road or help. No signal, no radio. None of them knew how to fix it. They waited, but then the strangers appeared. They wore gray robes, Jared said quietly. They called themselves the Chosen. He went on to describe how this group claimed to belong to a secret community, living in isolation, hidden from the modern world. A refuge from the collapse, they said, was coming. They told the students the outside world was doomed, and only those who listened would survive. Jared lowered his eyes, voice cracking. I know, it sounds insane, but we were cut off. No one came, no one heard us. They were the only option. He paused again, and then we followed them. The investigators sat in silence, but their eyes never lost focus. The way Jared told his story didn't sound like a testimony. It felt like a fever dream spoken into a thunderstorm, irrational yet impossible to ignore. He was breathing heavily, gripping the edge of the table like the memories were dragging him under. At first, it was peaceful, he said. They fed us, gave us places to sleep, told us we were safe. People started to believe because it was easier than facing the truth. Jared paused. His eyes drifted, staring beyond the still walls of the interrogation room back into that forest. He swallowed hard. But then things started to twist. He explained. After a few days of dreamlike comfort, the atmosphere shifted. They, the strangers in gray robes, began to impose strange rules. No one was allowed to speak of home. No one could call each other by their real names. The past was forbidden, like a contagious disease. They called it soul cleansing, Jared whispered. They said we were shedding a rotted world, and this was the only reality now. His voice trembled. Then the food, there was something in it. It made my mind slow down. Everything became foggy. The dreams started getting clearer, too clear. The dreams, he said, felt like memories that didn't belong to him. Images repeated, circles of fire burning in the woods, whispered songs in an unknown language, and blank masks staring straight into the soul. Then they started assigning sleep shifts, he said. We couldn't choose when to sleep. It didn't matter if you were tired or awake. They had to know when your mind was dreaming and when it wasn't. Jared closed his eyes, his lips pressed tight as if holding something back. Some started to resist. A heavy silence fell, thick as stone. I saw them dragged off in the middle of the night. No screams. No one came back. No one dared to ask. Jared looked up. In his eyes was a strange gleam, like he was still lost somewhere under the forest canopy, in a place that had seen what no human should. They called themselves the true survivors, he said. And we were just seeds. We weren't chosen to live. We were chosen to be exchanged for something else. He stopped, chest rising and falling with ragged breath. They said those who refused would return to the earth. But I knew better. I saw what was left behind after they were taken. Jared slowly raised both hands, not to gesture, but as if checking whether he was still real. I didn't escape. I was left behind. A punishment or a warning, I don't know. His voice dropped to a near whisper. But I'm not the last, and I'm not the worst. On the gloomy morning of June 14th, inside a sealed conference room at the Oregon Bureau of Investigation, no one moved as Jared Fields continued his story. What he shared, though absent from any official records for more than 2 decades, now surfaced like an untouched shadow in the long, dark history of the class of '99's disappearance. In 2006, I decided to run. His voice wasn't loud, but every word cut through the heavy air like a knife. I found a gap in the perimeter fence. I ran until my feet bled, but I never really escaped. He bowed his head, hands curling as if every fiber of his being still remembered the tremble of that night. I hid all those years. I thought if I stayed silent, they wouldn't find me. But when the news broke about the bus being discovered, I knew. They were still out there. He didn't need to say who they were. Everyone in the room could feel the presence, unseen but looming, in the way Jared's eyes darted and his body trembled. I can't stay silent anymore, he rasped. I have to tell it, even if it costs me my life. The room sank into suffocating silence. What Jared revealed wasn't just a hidden truth. It was evidence of something larger, more horrifying. A covert religious structure, a buried cult deep within America, living off the grid, obeying their own dark commandments, and willing to sacrifice human lives for their twisted beliefs. As Jared stepped into the light, the public reaction split like an old wound torn open again. Some parents clung to his testimony like a final strand of hope, desperate to believe, or needing to believe, that someone had survived to tell the story. But others, especially the families who had lost children, couldn't accept him. To them, Jared was the embodiment of unforgiven guilt, the last person to see their kids alive, and the one who ran, who lived when the others didn't. Under mounting media pressure, authorities placed Jared under witness protection. They couldn't risk losing him again, not just because he was the only surviving witness, but because he might be the last key. Still, the story was far from whole. Fragmented evidence, Emily's sketchbook filled with cryptic symbols, the incomplete remains found on the bus, only hinted at a deeper, colder, unnamed force. In September of that year, Jared released his memoir titled Between the Trees and Human Blood. The book didn't just recount his years in captivity, it painted a portrait of a deranged belief system where human lives were nothing more than sacrificial offerings. The book sparked national outrage. Half the country hailed him as a brave survivor. The other half called him a madman, fabricating horror for profit. But despite the divide, one thing was undeniable. Jared had seen something the world was never meant to face. The 1999 disappearance, even with added answers, never truly closed. The forests of Oregon, where the bus had been abandoned, have since become a pilgrimage site for those obsessed with the mystery. And sometimes people swear they see flickering fires in the night or hear soft singing echoing from deep within the trees. Some say the cult never left. The forest still hasn't spoken. Jared's final confessions didn't end the nightmare, they revived it. His memoir became a wildfire that split the community in two. One half saw it as a call of conscience, the other, the ramblings of a madman. Yet the story of the class of '99 remained like a wound that would never close, a cut without blood, bleeding quiet sighs into the heart of the town. For the families who lost their children, the pain never faded. Some still walk into the woods, listening to every fallen leaf, hoping it might be their child's whisper. Others have learned to live with the memory the way you live with the remnants of a passing storm, long gone, but leaving the scent of rot forever inside you. The Jared fever exploded across the media. From talk shows to podcasts to conspiracy forums, everyone had a reason to believe or not believe. But no one could ignore that something was lurking behind the surface of the truth. Real or not, Jared's voice stirred something primal in people's minds, the fear of being forgotten in the dark. And then, on an overcast day with no warning, Jared returned to where it all began, Forest Grove High School. No one accompanied him. No one knew he came. He walked slowly to the class of '99 memorial, the names carved in stone, a promise that they once existed. Jared knelt. From inside his worn-out coat, he pulled an object time had begun to erase, a tattered yearbook, yellowed and fraying at the edges. He opened it. His eyes passed over the faces, classmates, friends, dreams that were left behind in the woods. And then quietly he tucked a handwritten note into the back cover. The handwriting was shaky, simple, but carried the weight of a final incantation. We tried to leave. Only I got out. I'm sorry. No one saw Jared leave. No one saw him disappear down the trail behind the school. But the yearbook and the note remained, a buried memory, waiting for someone brave enough to turn the page. Some believe Jared was just crafting a sorrowful hallucination to fight off the madness inside him, but others whisper maybe he didn't tell everything. That deep in the forest, something still waits. A presence, or a belief, ancient, dark, and never willing to let its prey go completely. Whether you believe it or not, one thing is undeniable. The class of 1999 didn't vanish. They were taken. And the forest remembers.